Okay, well, hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us again today. Our guest today is James Young. He's the founder and chief learning officer of the Product Community, the leading authority in product development for associations. Before that, he served as the chief learning officer at the American College of Chest Physicians and the Society of College and University Planning. He holds a PhD from George Mason University, and he writes the Innovative Association, a weekly Substack newsletter read by thousands of association professionals worldwide, including me. And it's full of great, insightful content. Jim's conviction is simple. Most associations are sitting on far more value than they realize. They just haven't learned how to turn it into products people will actually pay for. So today, Jim is going to challenge some of the assumptions that keep associations stuck and give us a practical framework for moving from a membership model built on belonging to one built on real measurable outcomes for members. Jim, welcome. Really great to have you with us.
Thank you, AJ. Much appreciated. Looking forward to our dialogue.
So, I mean, as I mentioned, you write this weekly Substack, and it's full of great content. And one of the things that you touch upon and actually talk about quite often that I'd like to
Mhm.
start with is really the revenue problem. And you've said that membership and revenue should be outcomes of great value creation, not goals in themselves. So why do so many associations still have that backwards?
I think about this a lot, and I do write about it a lot. I tuck this into a lot of different newsletters. I think it's become universal to me in my thinking and my work. What I learned, I was at two associations for 10 years, and I was charged together as part of a group to saying, what's the relationship between engagement and revenue? How might we together as a community think differently about value creation? However, that set of ideas, just that ideal always ran counter to short-term thinking about monthly revenue, monthly, how many new members, how many people are leaving and why. And it really forced us into some tactical thinking that almost disallowed us from doing things interesting, which ultimately for us was to stop thinking about the short term and to start thinking together about journeys. So, coming from higher ed my whole career, I come out of learning communities and I got a strategy background. I've been doing product development for a long time. I'm member centric all the time. It took me about 2 years until my view changed and I felt member was the wrong focus. The focus became forever member journey. And it was a new question, and it completely reframed how we thought about value, how we thought about our relationships with our members, how we thought about approaching prospective members. And so, therefore, what became the value was what we do as a community, and then the outcomes became membership and diversified revenue. Took a while, wasn't easy, but we felt when that model was shifted that the emphasis was really kind of almost like in a hamster wheel. It was really hard to navigate change and evolution in what we viewed as the old model.
Mm. Okay, that's really useful framing. I know that you've actually developed a bit of a tool
Yes,
that's designed specifically to help associations figure out where they are on this kind of journey. And it's the product community maturity model.
that's
Can
right.
you
Yes.
can you give us a bit of a high level overview of how that works and why that's particularly useful for associations?
Yeah, I'll go super low tech here. If you can see this model right here, this is all
Love
online. I'm turning it
it.
into a digital tool just so you have a sense of it.
Mm,
It's a lo-fi tool. It's based off 6 dimensions. And we view these as the 6 dimensions for doing two things really, really, really well. Understanding who we serve and evolving how we create value together to basically create a learning community that evolves us again, like I said before, from serving short-term needs into seeding long-term value. And so this tool, it's called the association, the product community maturity model. It basically, the six dimensions are culture, vision, customer, membership, but it's broader than membership, design and build, go to market, and performance. And how it works, how the tool works is I've used it, I've facilitated it with hundreds of different associations. It is kind of our shortest route to like strategic thinking that we have. The first thing it
Mm.
does is it creates a gap because it forces us to be thinking about like where are we in these six dimensions? And then it challenged us to say like where do we want to go? And so over like an hour and a half with a rich, diversified group of stakeholders, we use this tool and it basically tells us universally, never had anybody like say, we're knocking it out of the park on these six dimensions. They basically say, you know, we're well thought of. Membership is down, revenue is down. It's not very diversified. We do good work. We have good service. It's a good community, but something isn't there. And this tool like brings that right to the forefront. And I can, after the meeting, send AJ the link to the article that talks about the tool in depth.
Right. You mentioned that you get a number of different stakeholders involved. Do you ever get a situation where they might have very divergent views? And if so, how do you sort of handle that as part of the pulling it back together?
Some divergent views. First of
Mm.
all, it's a very cooperative tool. If
Mm.
people disagree, I think the facilitation eases their mind a little bit. What they learn right away is the tool is designed to expose shared value, but it's also designed to expose deficiency. So it's these two things in one, saying, "Oh, we're doing good work, but wow, this is through a different lens. I hadn't thought of it this way."
Mm.
So there'll be disagreement on where people plot themselves on the tool, but largely we can work through them, and we actually use the facilitation to say, okay, where are we? We can be both. And sometimes people view themselves as on the border between two different parts of the model.
Mm. That's a nice way to do it, sort of collaborative and a great way to then sort of get discussion
Absolutely.
going and get that consensus. Yeah.
Right. We can't shut people up. It's a very
No.
positive way. I almost start every consulting arrangement or strategic plan with this tool because it really shows, well, we have some promise here. This is doable. I recognize this. I know what it is. We can do things differently, but as our conversation goes on, we'll
Mm.
we'll talk about the changes we'd have to make to actually become what I would call an indispensable value engine. That's a phrase I use a
Right.
lot in my space.
Nice. Mm. So, of those six competencies, then, which one do you find that associations are most consistently underestimating, and why is that?
Um, I I'm going to cheat and say there's a tie. Um, Go to market is one, and go to
Mm.
market is basically how do we take the value we create and deliver it to our membership. Pretty straightforward. How do we execute on our annual meeting? How do we get webinars to market, podcasts, course learning, even advocacy? I mean, you name it. Um, we're pretty successful at the short-term hit in those things. I think that's something we do really well as kind of an
Mm.
operationally centric, how do we serve the members' needs today?
Right.
We are not good at all about delivering value or anticipating what's coming and translating all the value that we've created, the raw materials that we have, into things that will keep membership engaged over time. So very weak in go to market. The other one
Mm.
is a little bit of a cheat code. We call it customer. It's really membership, but we call it customer because we think of um, big tent membership, which includes vendors, sponsorships, folks like on the call, what we would derisively call software vendors, really partners to help us
Mm.
deliver value, is what I would call AJ. Um, we don't know we don't know nearly enough about our membership than we may think we do. So people
mm,
tend to rate themselves higher on it. But if we're learning anything in 4 years of the product community, is that people don't want more stuff. They don't want more things. They don't want a busier inbox. They want to feel connected. They want to solve problems. They want to cross boundaries. They they want to make impact. These are all outcomes of really great value, and these are all outcomes of understanding who the membership is, empathizing with them deeply, and creating things that help meet those underlying goals: impact, connection, belonging, value. They do want to connect with each other in person and
mm,
online. That is
yeah,
vital. So the people don't want more stuff is one of our mantras. We're called product community, but ultimately it's community product because community drives everything. It drives the value we create. And then ultimately, a well-designed product community results in two things: a growth engaged membership and diversified revenue. Like I said
mm,
in the first
yeah,
in your first question. So it's nice running an organization like this because you
mm,
really do start to see the trends. And I think there's a lot of assumptions about what we understand um, about our members. It goes
mm,
way beyond surveys and focus groups.
yeah. Okay, that's great. So, okay, so we've got a bit of a picture then of where most associations now. Let's talk about what they actually do about it. You said that great
Sure.
products, compelling community builders,
Yes.
and most associations are sitting on years of content that they might have recorded. This could be recordings from annual meetings or the webinars, guides, reports, surveys. What's the difference between that content, which in some cases might just be gathering dust, and a product a great product that someone will actually pay for that will get them towards that compelling community?
I love this question. Um, I believe that we are addicted to single use, one and done content and experiences. It's not a criticism of what we do, but it is harming us because we're not designed to design pathways that meet the needs of our members. Our members are on professional journeys. And the way we think about it in the product community, they're on 50-year professional journeys. We own the space from age 22 to retirement. That is our space in the space of association. And I think thinking boldly in that way changes that conversation from we serve members to we serve the forever member journey. It's just a different set of questions. It doesn't mean we're not still serving the member in the short run. It absolutely does. But it
Mm,
changes how we think about connecting value together over time. So, all of that stuff that we've created over the
mm,
years, there's some lenses whereby which an association can determine whether or not it is of use for the future. Is it evergreen? Is it in evergreen, meaning is it in the condition and is the theory or the practice, whatever is, say it's an apple growing society or a librarian society or an engineering society, is the content reusable in a way that it is significant, that people can apply it? Um, can you present that content in a way in which you can use just every day more sophisticated AI tools to start to think differently about how that content might draw people in? Oftentimes it's technology infused. So I
mm,
think of your company and your organization as saying, okay, how might we work with an association and Jim to create a longitudinal experience? Well, the number one thing we would want to know is, do we fully understand the needs of our members? Number one.
mm,
Number two, what does a pathway look like? And then how do we string content and experiences together? So what I always argue is simple, which would be it's a simple early when you're just kind of starting and thinking about this stuff. If you can get your everyday member to do three things in a row in a fairly short amount of time, and one of the three can be your annual meeting or it can be a course cohort. Um, this isn't meaning more marketing. It's more, are we designing the right things, not just to deliver them, but are we developing the right things to learn about our members? So when we get new value, new products out to market, it's not to just stuff it out into the market to try and make revenue. That's the old way. That doesn't work. What does work, however, is that we start to test new value with small segments of our association to learn what works, what doesn't work, how might we connect people to value or connect people to other people to experience value. And then what we start to see is we start to see a different set of conversations. So the relationship would be
Mm,
between here's the value we are creating and here's the connections we're making. And then ultimately over time, with all of this stuff, what we're learning is we're finding revenue bearing solutions
mm,
while we are re-engaging a somewhat dormant segments of our membership community. So it's kind of two things at once.
mm.
Does
Yeah, I
that need
love that.
clarification? Does that make sense?
No, it does. Yeah, absolutely. And I
There's
guess
an interplay. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I'm keen to, you mentioned the annual meeting, and
Yeah.
you've described that previously as a bit of an incubator
Yeah.
where, ideas can be tested and seed products or minimum viable products can take on a life of their own. How does that actually, what does that look like in practice? How does an association sort of start doing that? And then, most importantly, not just kick it off and then drop it and becomes another sort of project that a stretch team never touches, but
Yeah,
something
no,
that can
I
actually be ran with.
yeah, let me pause by just saying my mom since retired was an events manager and she worked for a publisher and she was one of those vendors in the big um the hall and they were showcase and they had one of the largest, and from her lens and then also working in associations and having events report to me, um don't mess with these people. Don't just like start to pile things on without some empathetic approach towards a real strong why. The reason I say that isn't that I think events people are doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're delivering the value that the community wants. Having said that, I also at the same time think we need some new capabilities, and I can't think of a business model in the world in any industry or any market that bets 50 to 70% of its revenue on 4 days out of the year for 20% of its customer base. It's not a sustainable business model. So therefore, we look to the annual meeting as a
Mm,
source of inspiration, a source of collaboration, friends coming together, but also people across boundaries who haven't met each other yet, a place of learning, but also a place of trying new things, testing new ideas, making that part of the program, infusing new ways of delivering content. I think, in addition to creating these environments for incubation, if you think of the way we communicate with our members
mm,
as triangulated, and say we do regular surveys and we get data from our programming. We do focus groups. The third one would be what are we actively learning from testing new ideas in the market? That one we tend not to do at all.
mm,
And that one I think of how do we incubate? You can show up and you can say, welcome to Library Fest, whatever your name of your conference is. We have this super exciting new idea. We're just kicking it off. We need you, and you are the participators in helping us co-create this. It's not like we're dropping it from the sky. The membership is involved and the volunteer group is involved. It's one way of like putting our toe in the water and thinking about product development that isn't like a new unfunded mandate. It's a new
Mm,
way to tuck in new value into the organization and then also to create what I would view as a germination, starting to seed pathways.
right. Yeah, no, that makes good sense. So I guess if you've got that commitment from
Yeah.
people at that event, and I'm, let's say I'm sitting there as the education director or an executive director at a smaller association. So you've got some great ideas that have germinated through this discussion, but you've got zero budget
Yes.
or very little
Yes.
budget. How do they go about building a minimum viable product or something like that using, say, existing resources that they might have?
I have one word answer, and then I have an explanation on that. Leverage. When we talk about new value, and again, when I say product, all products are spin-offs of old products. There are no new ideas. All new ideas have been tested somewhere else in the market. We're never going to have the capacity or even the capability to start thinking about some app that's going to save the day. Although I like that idea. We would have to have some data, some infrastructure, some internal capability before we could do something like that. There would have to be something we could leverage if we wanted to get into gaming, which we did at Chest quite a bit. We had like
Mm,
20 separate games, and we viewed that as not only an incubator to test what resonated, it was also an incubator to see how doctors learned, how they
yep.
exposed information, how they applied something. These were pulmonologists from 20,000 pulmonologists from around the world. We'd get about 5K to each event.
Mm,
Um, so when I say leverage, the one thing that I would recommend, all associations need a portfolio. They need a portfolio of offerings. And I don't think I've met one that does that type of thinking. How do we think
mm,
about the value we create? How do we create a list of our offerings? Start there. How do we see all the overlaps amongst our offerings? And then how do we, based off our deeper and deeper understanding of our members, start to think about combining some of that to create new value for connection? And then new value
mm,
can start with things like I have an article coming out tomorrow that says stop networking, start connecting. And it's based off of how do we create community by something that we do all the time at annual meetings, but that will leverage network science to start thinking creatively about connecting people who can create value together in a community.
mm,
So having a portfolio and then starting to think about designing your events so that people who don't know each other meet each other. It sounds a little counterintuitive because you want to meet up with your pals, but it's of our interest to get people who've never met each other, who come from different sectors of the industry or sectors of the membership, younger people, older people, somebody from finance meeting somebody from marketing, again, from different
yeah.
organizations that the association might serve.
I love that. Love that concept of connecting. Yeah, rather than just networking. Interesting. And so that might actually answer this next question to some extent, but I'd like to sort of zoom out a little bit and thinking across associations. What's across the sector then? What's sort of one unmet need that you're seeing in your discussions right now that associations are well positioned to solve, but are generally ignoring?
I'm not that old, but all these years later, we have yet to figure out the youth market. The 25 to 40 seems like we keep relying on, oh, when people turn around 40, when they're, their kids are a little bit older and they're out of that early career. Um, I don't know how many generations we can last with the type of thinking is that they're going to start showing up when they get into their late 30s and 40s. So this is, I won't say that don't try and focus on this, but we are trying to take the old system, the old model, and trying to say, how do we take an events-driven organization that emphasizes single use, one and done, that relies on a benefits-centric membership model and get people to come. So I wrote a
Mm,
recent piece. I think it's called Membership as a System. It is called
mm,
Membership as a
mm,
System. And the big difference that we're seeing is the old model is what we call value for exchange. Value for exchange means you pay this and you get a membership and you get a set of benefits for it. What we are seeing is that membership needs to become a participation system. And once it becomes a participation system, which goes beyond committee representation, volunteer to reviewing the program, and we've tried to model this out to work from the kind of like passive participation into something a contributory model that nudges people over into, heck, I got skin in the game here. I care about
mm.
this thing. I want to see not just this thing survive, I want to see this thing thrive. Um, Long answer to a short question. I don't remember how I
No,
answered it at the beginning.
no, that's great. I mean, I know that you've also written about how there are those different. You should people associations think about their members as different cohorts and ages, and what people can bring, and where people in their career at different stages, and how associations should be addressing and working with those cohorts differently. And I thought that was really interesting, because obviously
Absolutely.
somebody who's just starting out, and as you say, that very young member has very different needs and aspirations from somebody who's mid-career or end of career and retiring, who still has an awful lot of wisdom and know-how and experience to pass on. And it's how to build up the systems, internal systems to engage, I guess, with those different cohorts in a way that's meaningful for each of them. Super important.
I will pick up on that and say things that have been around for a while that I think when someone asks me, well, what's the future of associations? I don't say things like AI. I think AI, we have to embed AI into what we do. We have to. It's not going to be a choice. So what I say are what are the mechanisms, the cultures, the mindsets to evolve us from the old model, which I've kind of described as a single use, one and done, events
Mm,
centric company. Not here to say we're getting rid of events. I wouldn't suggest that. But changing our focus and shifting it away from that short term member benefits model towards a long term value based journey that out of the gate expects contribution. I'm not talking about cash or even
mm,
dues. I'm talking about I belong to a thriving community. And the more I'm writing a book on community design and what I'm learning in my research is what we do, there's a biological need for what we do, but we tend to neglect the biological need and we tend to reduce it down to just events. Um,
mm,
Community can absolutely be a thriving entity. And I would even go as far to say it will be our ultimate differentiator. A well designed community, a community that cares about each other, that works across boundaries, that's willing to solve the really hard problems in their particular industry or profession, can be evergreen. It can be
mm,
differentiated in the market. It can prevent competition from people who can undercut us with the title of our presentation today. I think
Mm.
people can come up with content models that are faster, just as authoritative. Um, that could lead some of our future members to bypass us.
What does that community engagement look like then outside of events? What are some of the tools or best practices that an association can adopt to get that community engagement happening to that level?
I would test pathways and cohorts. And if you're not doing pathways and cohorts, they're a great way of identifying something for a particular segment. And so, say you could say, we run an association for pediatric oncology. We serve the healthcare team for childhood cancer. That's our organization. What if we created a small cohort program, and that cohort program had 10 to 15 people from the healthcare team? Could be a single hospital situation, or could be multiple people. Could be people from nurses or advanced practice providers, or could be um, somebody from radiology. It could be a number of things. Has to be lightweight. These people are super busy. The compound value that comes from a learning cohort is manifest. And what that means is people learn new things. It's designed as experiential and applied. And darn it if they don't have a bunch of new buds. So you have these like three levels of value that shifts us away from the old model, which is value in exchange for value
Mm,
in use. So the new
mm,
model in our world is value in use. So cohort programs would be one. The second one, similar but different. How do you have a cohort effect in a pathway? And pathways are just designed to have people experience things. They don't always have to be in a group, but there should be social components to it.
mm,
Back to your question several minutes ago, how might we identify and leverage found value in our portfolio? Are there things that we can leverage and reuse? I don't want to say it's easy.
mm,
There are frameworks out there, many of which that we write about in our Substack, the Innovative Association. Um, Taking a product community view of the world is the differentiator, and it is a new capability, but it's a capability that we're going to recognize. Meaning, we've always been in the community business, and we have always created value for that community. What we're just
mm,
saying in product community, and what I write about all the time, is that there's a new way of doing it that is focused on that forever member journey. It's not focused on short-term consumption or short-term revenue hits. There has to be something that compounds over time. So there's a trigger to get people to behave and buy. Our model ultimately would say, if you are so satisfied with the value you are experiencing, value in community, but also value in resources and experiences, put that
mm.
membership on autopay. Just put it on autopay. It's like,
Yeah,
this is a thriving community, and I can't not be a part of this.
love
I
it.
don't hear a lot of associations starting with
Mm,
that level of
no,
energy and enthusiasm. That tends to be an outcome
mm,
of just a lot of hard work pushing single use one and done content up a hill.
yeah,
That
absolutely.
model isn't, it's not sustainable.
Mm. I love that, the cohort idea. And I guess different cohorts would have different ways of how they would come together and communicate and exchange ideas, be it, if they're in the same city, they can get together at a cafe or a restaurant or
Yeah,
whatever. There's plenty of online tools that
there
could
is.
also be used from WhatsApp through to full community
Sure.
platforms. But how do you how do those cohorts structure and share the learnings from those exchanges to, back up to the association or to other cohorts, so that I don't know, there's some sort of sense of best practice, or they're getting the most out of it. How does that information disseminate?
Well, there's two things when you think of a cohort. One is number one is it's a facilitative experience. There is an architecture, there's a curricular architecture that would go with it. There's still content and experiences. But in and of itself, back to our super simple model here, we don't know enough about what our customers need, and therefore we are either cautious or foolhardy about putting new things out to market.
Mm,
Understanding that there's a strong assumption that there's young people, mid-career people, and maybe more advanced people who are love the purpose of the association, but are hungry to do things a little differently.
mm,
How do we find those people and seed those people in a cohort? And the reason I say that there's a curriculum and there's an architecture and there's a facilitation, there needs to be a design.
mm,
Because what happens in a really well facilitated cohort is the value is created in the cohort. And the value isn't
mm,
like, here's tons of assignment, you've just joined an MBA. No, it has nothing to do with that, but there's a lot of structure that says, how are we going to solve problems as a small entity? So the new capabilities obviously would be, because it's a program, is you would need people who are experienced in designing a cohort. That's why you start small with a single one and you
mm,
start to refine the model. So you have like the people who lead it would be your Uber volunteers who also happen to have a skill in thoughtful facilitation. And then we have just a system and we say, okay, we're going to run a 2-month cohort and it's going to end in a celebration. And the celebration is, hey, it's really nice to meet you. I would like to stay in touch. To, hey, how might we continue this? I learned a lot. I think we are onto something. How do we together take this smaller model, 10 people over 2 months, and replicate that in other areas? So I have clients who are doing that exact same model. If you try and change the association by creating community of 20,000 members or 5,000 members, that tends not to work. What works is that we are a community of communities, and understanding where we might identify segments that are different enough. You don't want to just keep the people who know each other together. You want to get people meeting each other. That's the network effect. And once you have that network effect, you start bridging these little nodes. And all of a sudden, you have a burgeoning community that starts small. But then you have, when your annual meeting comes around, there's tons of reunions, these little
love it.
reunions,
Yeah.
and you hear laughing. You're
Mm,
laughing because hugging, and it's great to see you again. Um, I've been doing cohort work for like 30 years now. They work.
yeah, that's fantastic. I love
They're
it.
dynamite.
Yeah. Do you
It's a
have any other ways to sort of measure that you look at that, or tools that you provide associations to measure the success of how that's going, especially early on, other than the fact that nobody's killing each other? Um, is there
Yeah.
are there
Don't
are
forget
there
that
other
one. Exactly.
yeah, yeah.
Right. Um, I'm not done with it yet. I do write quite a bit about
Mm,
metrics. I teach a course on metrics. It's not what most people think it is. Yes, we talk about how to develop metrics. Where we are shifting in measuring success, and it's still an instrument. Um, so back to what I said earlier, kind of a triangulated view of how we're learning about our members. One,
mm,
semi-regular surveys, another one, really rich focus groups with AI. We can capture a lot of these things and start seeing the patterns. And I would
mm,
put in that focus group or that survey thing, all the data we get about satisfaction, how people like it. The third one is the one that most people neglect, is when we do, for instance, a cohort program, fill out this little evaluation sheet and tell us how it went. We think success comes from something we call compound value. And compound value isn't just like, hey, I like this. Hey, I learned this. Hey, I will use this. I will apply this. I will solve problems with this. Compound value becomes something that's full of inputs and outputs. We have a simple model called the results chain. And on the left end of the model is inputs and outputs. Almost all associations are in the inputs and outputs world. As you move to the right of the model, in the middle, no, it's inputs, activities, outcomes. And to the right are outcomes and impact. And what we want to do with a compound value model is that we want to evolve that kind of old school thinking about, well, hey, they really liked it, or hey, they showed up, kind of those initial metrics, and evolve them into questions about how are they going to apply what they learned? How are they going to leverage their new relationships? And then what ideas might evolve from them. So from input, activities, and output, evolving towards outcomes and the big kahuna, the ultimate aim. What does impact mean in our association, and how do we strive for impact? So that's not a short-term goal. That's not a something you can even think about in the short term. It's a cumulative journey of value. It's a cumulative effort. I haven't said it throughout this call yet. It takes leadership. It takes courage. It takes a little bit of risk taking. But almost everything I'm talking about here goes back to our knitting. Why did we develop these organizations? We want to get together as people to solve problems, and we want to create value. That's the basis of what product community is, and that's really what we're talking about here. I'm just saying that if we don't modernize the model, we do run some, what I would view as an existential risk.
Absolutely, yeah. Interesting. Yeah, because I think what a lot of associations, the way a lot of them model themselves is very much top down in terms of your content going one way. And what you're describing requires a lot of different parts of an association to sort of work together that might not have been working in a particular way. It might surprise them.
I'm sorry for laughing. I'm laughing in recognition.
Yeah.
So true.
So, I mean, if that's sort of a symptom of a deeper problem, what's the sort of real fix to getting people, the associations and their communities to work together in this new way?
A common way of designing an association or any outward facing service model is by department. And that's just, it's pretty common, so we can't really get around it. Our members do not care about membership or professional learning or advocacy or volunteer leadership or the foundation. They want to be part of a community, and they want to experience the world as a professional journey. It is a requirement to work across boundaries. I am not going to sugarcoat this. Verb own and say, we own the value journey. How do we together better serve a rapidly changing market, a market that's confused at what's going on geopolitically, but also confused at what's going on in the market? And then we have these new technologies that, where'd this AI thing come from 4 years ago? I was just like, what? I've already lived through, like, I was a kid and it was records, and then it went to like cassette tapes, and then no, it was like 8 track somewhere in there, and then CDs, and anyway, that's our job. Our job is to serve that, and the best way of serving it, for back to our agreement, people are tapped, they're stressed, they're stretched. They do believe in the purpose, and they want to serve well. One way to create efficiencies is for us to work across boundaries.
Yeah. And I think it's what it's interesting what you say about the difference of the silos in terminology and verbiage, because it's something that's come up in a few of our recent discussions we've had with other experts, is even terminology around something like non-dues revenue. It can create silos, whereas really it's just
Totally
revenue.
agree.
It's like our revenue. It's
Yeah.
not the non-dues revenue and this and dues revenue.
Yeah,
That's
that I
you know,
don't even like to use that phrase, even though people
mm,
do recognize it. I rarely use that phrase. Um, because I think you just said it.
yeah,
It creates kind of like informal or indirect boundaries.
yeah. So changes, might actually evolve through these sort of just simple changes, starting with terminology and starting with slight changes, and that can lead to changes in thinking and people talking together, hopefully. And yeah,
Yeah,
interesting.
I definitely subscribe to an evolution of
Mm,
language, not out of stubbornness, but out of I guess what I do when I try and talk about what a new model of innovation might be, or what any model of innovation would be, is to say what I said a couple of minutes ago. I probably said it several times. Um, I don't think we should abandon why we exist. I don't think we should abandon why we were created from the beginning. The more I
mm,
do research on how healthy communities come into being, is that there is a biological need. And so, in and of itself, we want to get together. Um, I just think the future model, we've been hemmed in structurally by something else we write about a lot, which is cash cow revenue. So we totally get hemmed in by serving the things that bring in the lion's share of the money. And it changes our entire orientation towards that short term thinking, almost like a desperate grasp for revenue. And it becomes a business model problem that has to be switched, it has to be flipped. And the new model would be, how are we a community first association that creates value? This is not totally kumbaya. This is evolutionary. It takes time. But again, you stick to your knitting. We're a purpose driven organization. We are a community that creates value.
mm,
How do we, over time, shift from a member centric benefits model towards a forever member journey?
mm,
People will recognize that language. It's a tweak on what we've been talking about for 100 some years in our space. I think the change is becoming required.
mm,
That's what I'm thinking, that the old model is a burnout model. It's a staff burnout model. It's not sustainable. Um, and I think people would reckon. I'd be interested to see if people would chime in about that. Are there questions in the chat we
yeah,
should
there are some
address
questions
or
coming up.
get
Yeah,
to?
yeah, there are. So that will
Thank you, AJ.
just
This is
just move on to one last question though, and because I want to
Yeah,
pick up
sure.
on that journey thing. And so
Yes, sir.
if an if an association doesn't adopt a journey first mindset, who's eventually going to eat their lunch? Is it for-profit disruptors or challenger associations? What
Well,
else?
I'll just be frank. The Journey model is a community first run association. It does
Mm,
change that. When I say 50-year learner journey, 50-year member journey, I'm not talking about a 50-year strategic plan. I'm not talking about prediction. I'm talking about being that co-partner throughout someone's professional journey. Ultimately, the Journey model, the investment in that is an investment in people. It's an investment in care. It's an investment in value creation. Um, People will recognize it because it's basically based about understanding the needs of people. Let me
mm,
say this: communities don't always get along with each other. Communities are messy. That's part of the magic of them. Keeping the decorum, keeping the professionalism, keeping it above board, disagreeing professionally. But I will say this: the metaphor we always use in product community is bridges are held up by tension.
mm,
And there are some essential tensions in the world of the future and combating the future together across boundaries in which people do have differences, even though they're in the same association. Um, that's a navigable skill. That's also what I would consider to be leadership. The associations that will fail are service centric organizations, content centric organizations. We can no longer compete. We can no longer win. Is it part of the mix? Of course it is.
Mm,
If our content and our experiences are not differentiated in the market, we will not be able to compete on capacity and capability. We will not.
mm.
We own community and we own the 50-year learner journey. That's our space. And if we think that way and we evolve that way, exciting times ahead for sure.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well, that's
You're welcome.
I think that's a great place for us to then look at some questions been coming through. So here's one that's come through. With the idea of conferences as incubators, yes, some conferences can be formulaic or mechanical. Any tips or guidelines for how much a conference to devote to the idea of incubation? 10%, 20%? What's the best way to start if an association basically is doing nothing presently on this front?
Year one, I would go 10%. In year one, I would make sure it's allotted in the program plan. And I would also make sure it's, um, again, year one. Don't think of doing everything year one. You got to have a commitment from the executive director and the program team, the volunteers, that you're going to have a 3-year run for this. This is a commitment. And why? This commitment serves our community. It not just serves our community, it serves us understanding them, their needs. It should be fun, super organized, and rigorous. But year one, fairly lightweight, integrated thematically, whatever the theme of the conference might be.
Mm,
But then fun and proactive, some kind of a maker space in which you have 4 product ideas and you have a really good volunteer kind of like selling. What about this? What about this? Something. Find not enough associations are in games. There's lightweight ways of
mm,
getting into games to gamify new product ideas. And so that you can have some almost like a contest, fairly lightweight. It's got to be embedded in the program plan. If it's viewed as an add-on, it's going to be neglected. It's going to fail. It's going to die on the vine. Um, if you treat it as an add-on, it's going to die as an add-on.
mm, mm.
So 10%, I just threw out several ideas on how one might start to incubate new ideas. And new ideas should crowd out old ideas.
Yeah.
Um, we teach a portfolio class. It's free. We offer it all the time. It is not about adding more wood to the pile. It is not about burning people out. It is about understanding who our members are, how we can meet those member needs, and how we can serve them in a way that not only satisfies them, keeps them coming back, while we're not adding more initiatives to the staff who are tapped.
Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, I
You're
think we've
welcome.
got time for one more question here. I was thinking about what you said essentially about being purposeful with making connections at conferences. What are your personal best practices for this kind of approach at a conference? Put you on the
You
spot.
may not you may not know this about me, or you may be surprised by this, but I'm actually an introvert. Um, People are just like, no, you're not. And I'm like, yes, I am. What do you think these books are for? I get my energy in small groups or by myself. Um, I get nervous before conferences all these years later. I've been speaking forever. Um, I introduce myself. I sit down at a table of strangers. So I met Jay Doherty. Hi, Jay. My name is Jim. It's nice to meet you. I didn't know him at all, and he just kind of share a meal together. Um, I have an article coming out tomorrow that basically dispels the old school networking, which favors extroversion and performance and sales, um, towards a model in which we understand how to leverage people centered Basically, it's how do you leverage network science? And there's some best practices in that. And it's trying to pull people in together who wouldn't otherwise be in the same room having a low stakes, psychologically safe dialogue.
Mm.
And then trying to pull them into something. Do you want more of this? We're going to set up a small mastermind group, kind of like a mini cohort, but it's just a call. There's no homework, there's no models. In this mastermind group, we want to try it for 8 weeks. We're going to have a facilitation, and we're going to start off with work-life balances for nurses.
Mm.
Just low bar, simple,
Yeah,
something that demonstrates our care for the hard work our members do on a day-to-day basis.
love it. That's great. Excellent. Well, thank you. So, I guess just before we go and wrap it up, then, where's the best place for people to follow your work or connect with you? You've got the productcommunity.us site. Anywhere else?
I can be reached through LinkedIn. I would love to connect on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active there. Like my website, like AJ said, is productcommunity.us. I like to call it productcommunity.us. It's
Yeah, I
not
like
really United States,
that.
it's us. Um, and then I really am proud of the Substack of the newsletter. It's called the Innovative Association. It's free to subscribe, and that is should know it by heart. Product community, one word, .substack.org.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well, we'll make sure that we include all of that in our show notes and our LinkedIn post after the show. Jim, thank you. This has been a really valuable and insightful conversation. I love your work. I do love your Substack writing, and you obviously put a lot of effort into it. And it's just full of useful and insightful information. So thank you very much for giving us your time today. We really appreciate it.
You're
To
welcome.
everyone else, I'd like to say if you haven't already, subscribe to our newsletter at our website, intuto.com, and follow us, Intuto, on LinkedIn to be notified of upcoming webinars. Our next webinar, we're going to be talking credentialing, continuing education, and compliance. We're going to look at why you should be investigating and establishing a credential program if you don't already have one, and the impact it can have on member engagement and revenue. We'll also be showing you how you can manage credentialing inside Intuto with one of our most recent releases, making your program easier to administer. So, with that, thank you all very much for tuning in today, and goodbye. See you next time.